Welcome to another Pure Read audiobook. It's wonderful to have you with us. Before we get started, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. Supporting us in this simple and easy way ensures we can continue adding more delightful audiobooks for your listening enjoyment. The following story is copyrighted Pure Read Limited, the home of books you can trust. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Freedom in Purity, Western Historical Romance by Terri Grace, Part 1, Exodus. The Story of Kate Lander and Caleb Newton, Chapter 1. The Sheriff's Deputy. News traveled fast in Purity, and there was nothing like a gruesome murder to bring people pouring out into the town streets. For a moment, no one really knew who had been murdered, and speculation was rife. With all that was going on and the mass exodus of families, people were really scared. Then the real information got to the residents of the town. The murder victim was a middle-aged man, but no one could immediately identify who he was. His head had been badly beaten in and the features obscured. His body was found behind the morgue where the town had its dumping ground. "I really don't like this," Frank told his nephew, as he embarked on writing a report of the incident when they had returned to their office after escorting the body to the morgue. Where did this poor man come from, and what was his crime that someone had to go and do that to him? As it is, we can't even tell who he is, and so far, no one has come in to file a missing persons report. "What if he's from Cascade or Boise?" Caleb asked. "It looks like he might be a stranger to Purity. We need to send a telegram to the sheriffs of the towns around us so they can help us with the identification." But 2 days later, a distraught young woman came to the sheriff's office to report that her fiancé was missing. "Could you please describe your missing fiancé?" Caleb looked at the woman, but something about her didn't seem right. How old is he and what does he do here in Purity? "Jean-Pierre is 50. She blushed at Caleb's raised eyebrows. "I know. I'm only 19, but we are in love and about to get married." "You seem like a stranger. Are you from Purity?" The woman shook her head. "Jean-Pierre and I are from Cleveland, Ohio. We decided to come to the West so we could buy land and settle down here." She covered her face with her palms. "I'm so frightened because I don't know where my love is." "When was the last time that you saw him?" 2 days ago, he was going to the bank." She looked up briefly. "We arrived 3 days ago and have been staying at the White Horse Hotel." Caleb gawked. The White Horse Hotel was a new establishment and quite exclusive. It was Purity's first 5-star hotel, and only the wealthy could afford to stay there. "Did your fiancé have any business dealings with anyone else?" "Yes. We were meeting with a Mr. Abel Fritter," she said. Caleb didn't know the person she was referring to and told her so. From the bank, Jean-Pierre was to meet me so we could go and see Mr. Fritter, who was selling us land. "Do you think he might have gone to meet Mr. Fritter alone?" She shook her head. "He would never do that because he doesn't speak much English. I was the one who often translated for him whenever he had to conduct any business with his associates." She gave Caleb a tight smile. "Jean is French-Canadian and his English is terrible. But he trusts me and we make a good team." "Perchance, do you remember the clothes he was wearing when you last saw him?" From the description the young woman gave, Caleb realized that the dead man lying on the cold slab in the morgue was the person she sought. "I'm sorry, but I didn't catch your name." "Annabelle Morris," she said. "Ms. Annabelle, I'm sorry that I don't have good news for you. 2 days ago, we found someone fitting the description of your fiancé. Is he all right? Is my Jean-Pierre all right?" She looked scared. "I'm afraid that someone murdered him," Caleb said, and had to endure nearly 5 minutes of hysterical sobbing. He didn't know what to do with the young woman, and it was a relief when his uncle returned. "What's going on here?" Caleb rose to his feet. "Sheriff, this is Miss Annabelle Morris, and she came here looking for her fiancé. I just informed her that he was murdered." "Is that the man whose body was found 2 days ago?" "Yes, Sheriff. His name was Jean-Pierre, and Miss Morris informs me that he was in Purity on business. He and Miss Annabelle are from Cleveland, Ohio." "What kind of business?" Frank gave the young woman a piercing look, and Caleb could see that she looked quite intimidated. But there was something about her that troubled him all the same, and he purposed that when he got the chance to step away from her, he would share his suspicions with his uncle. "Pierre and I were supposed to get married, so we came to Purity to buy land, build a home, and settle down here. Is that right?" From the way Frank said those words, it was obvious that he also doubted Annabelle's story. "Young lady," he motioned for Caleb to move towards the door and so prevent her from escaping. Caleb did so, and Annabelle seemed to notice what was happening for. She rose to her feet. "I have to leave now," she said, nervously clutching her purse. "Sit down." Frank's tone was hard, and she did so, perching at the edge of the seat. "I have a dead man lying on a slab in the morgue, and I need answers right now. Let's start by you giving us your real name." "But I told you my name is Annabelle." "Miss, I'll throw you into one of the cells and keep you there until you come to your senses. Tell me your real name." "It's Misty Lewis," she said, and Caleb could see the sweat breaking out on her brow. "Where are you from?" "Boys." "So why were you trying to lie to us that you're from Ohio?" "I'm sorry." "Your behavior is very suspicious, and because of that, I'm going to hold you for at least 24 hours while we carry out our investigation." "Please, sir," Misty was in tears. "I won't be any problem to you, just let me go." "You're already a problem to me because first, you lied about your name and then where you came from. I have a strong suspicion that you know more about Mr. Pierre and the circumstances leading to his death than you're willing to let on. That gives me the right to hold you here until I get satisfactory answers." There was a flurry at the door, and Madame Blazing, the owner of the most notorious saloon in Purity, entered the station. "Where is she?" She pushed Caleb aside, and he looked at his uncle. She caught sight of Misty and held out both arms. "Oh, my dear, I'm so sorry to hear about what happened to Pierre." "Madame Blazing." Frank rose to his feet. Even though she was an obnoxious woman, she recognized authority and moved away from Misty. "What do you know about Mr. Pierre?" "Clement down at the morgue came to the saloon and was talking about the unidentified body of a middle-aged man lying in the morgue. So I got concerned as a good citizen and decided to go and find out who it was. You see, a number of people come to my saloon, and I like to know that my customers are all safe." "Is that right?" "When I found out about Pierre," she pretended to look sad. "I just couldn't believe it." Frank gave her a sharp look. "Did you know Mr. Pierre?" "Yes." "He was a business associate, and we've met twice before." She looked at Misty. "I also know that he was engaged to be married to my lovely friend here." "Who told you that Miss Lewis is here?" "Miss Lewis." She looked genuinely puzzled. "Who is Miss Lewis?" "This young woman right here." "Oh, right." But Madame Blazing had a frown on her face. "I went to the hotel to find her, but one of the desk clerks told me that she had come down to see the sheriff to report that her fiancé was missing. So I quickly came here to be with her." Frank and Caleb knew that the two women were hiding something. "So now that you've told her what happened to Pierre, Why don't you leave us so we can continue with our investigation? I was hoping you would let me take Miss Lewis home so she can rest. Frank sat back down, shaking his head. This case is getting more intriguing by the minute. Now I think this young lady has lied again about her name. Young lady, what is your real name? Sabrina Howey. Which might just be another alias. Frank waved Madame Blazing towards a chair, and she made quite a show of arranging herself in it. You might be interested to know that I'm going to hold Miss Howe, if that's really her name, for 24 hours until I get to the bottom of all this. She's a suspect in the murder of Mr. Jean-Pierre, and I intend to get answers. But surely you don't suspect such an innocent girl could do something so horrible as that. She might not have done it with her own hand, but I believe she knows more than she is letting on. And now, unless there's anything else I can do for you, Madame Blazing, please take your leave. Madame Blazing rose to her feet. Don't worry, honey. I'll get you the best attorney in Purity, and you'll be out in a jiffy. Thank you, ma'am. Chapter 2. Settling Down. Kate Lander was really sad, and wondered why she had ever come to Purity. The man who had invited her to come had turned out to be wicked, and it was just because of Amy that her life had been saved. Otherwise, she would now be dead and forgotten, and she shuddered. If Amy hadn't saved her from that cage in the basement, she wouldn't be here now. Amy. She was a true friend indeed, and Kate felt really guilty for the way she'd treated her in the past. Why had she believed that she was better than her friend? Back home in Charleston, West Virginia, she had lived with her aunt, and when the chance to come out west had risen, she'd asked Amy to come with her. But when they got to Purity, she hadn't given her friend a second thought when she met Kelvin Holland. He was so handsome and charming, and had literally swept her off her feet, making her forget that she'd made a promise to Amy that they would stay together until she got married. But her joy had turned into a nightmare when she found out that her fiancé had lured her to Purity so he could turn her into a prostitute. She'd fought to protect her virtue and nearly lost her life. But then in her pain and anguish, she had prayed for a miracle, which came in the form of Amy. Amy had found a job at the Mercantile and ended up getting married to the owner, Rowan Gunter. The two of them had taken Kate in and told her that she could stay for as long as she needed to. It felt good to have people looking out for her, but she still felt like she had failed in life. Kate entered the back room of the store, which Amy was trying to rearrange. I hope you're not tormenting yourself with sad thoughts. Please put all that behind you and move on, Kate. You'll meet a good man who will love and cherish you, and all this pain will end. I just feel so terrible for the way I treated you, and then you ended up saving my life. Not that again. Amy put an arm around Kate's shoulder. All is forgiven, and I wish you would just forgive yourself. I'll try, Kate said in a small voice. Good, Amy said. I don't want to see you looking sad. Why don't we go and visit with Candace? Amy looked around. Rowan can finish up here and also take care of the store until we return. Kate tried to hold back a little. I'd like to stay here, please. The store needs cleaning, and I don't want to leave it until later. Nonsense! Amy brushed her excuse aside. You clean this place every day. Besides, I can't trust you to be alone because you'll only allow yourself to descend into depression and despair, and I don't like seeing you like this. You're a good person, Kate, and that makes you so trusting of people, but we dealt with the Kelvin Holland issue, and I don't think he'll be troubling you again. Rowan and I will keep you safe. Thank you. The visit to Candace Parsons' house turned out to be just what Kate needed to get over her despair. The woman was a few years older than her, and she was also the new school teacher. Candace was on her knees in her living room, and in the middle of sorting out some books when the two of them arrived. Good. Girls. Candace rose to her feet and hugged them both, receiving the small package of sugar and butter from Amy and placing it on a table beside the door. I received these donations from a church in New York and need to sort them according to the classes they will be used in. Whoever packed them just mixed them all up, and I find that I'm unable to sort them all on my own. We're sorry to come and bother you when you're so busy, Amy started. You're both God sent, Candace told them. Sorry that I can't even find my way to the kitchen to get you a snack or even lemonade. These came in yesterday evening when I was in church, and I told old Kildare to just pack them inside my house. I thought it was just 4 or 5 crates. She waved a hand in the air, not 25 of them. Well, since we're here, what do you want us to do? Now, I have separated my classes at school into 1st to 3rd grade, 4th to 6th, and then 7th and 8th grade. This means we need to sort these books into 3 piles. What we can do is each take a class and work on the books pertaining to it. While sorting through the crate, if you find a book that doesn't belong to your class, pass it on to the person doing that grade. Once we've emptied the crates, we will repack the books again. May I make a suggestion? Amy asked. Sure, go ahead. Since we're each working on books for a particular class, why don't we just repack the crates as we go along? In that way, we shall cut down the work by something like half. Good idea, Candace was beaming. See, many hands make light work. They worked in silence for a while, and this allowed Kate to get lost in her own thoughts. She remembered the deputy sheriff who'd carried her in his arms from Kelvin's house and how safe she had felt then. Since then, Deputy Sheriff Caleb Newton had been coming to the store twice a day and sometimes even 3. Each time he did, her heart beat faster. What was happening to her? He had seen her at her worst, after spending nearly 7 days without a proper way of cleaning up. Yet he hadn't shunned her because of the unpleasant odors, but had wrapped her up in a thick fur and carried her like a baby. She wondered if he was married and many times had come close to asking Rowan about him, but something always held her back. He probably thought of her as a foolish woman who had come to purity without first finding out who was meeting her. Kate, Amy's voice cut through her thoughts. Sorry, I was far away. Clearly, the woman said with a smile. Candace and I were just talking about you helping out at the school as a teacher's assistant. But I don't know anything about teaching. No problem, Candace smiled. I also didn't know much about teaching until someone took me under their wing and trained me. Now I find that I love it and feel quite blessed to have come to purity and been put in charge of the new school. You're doing a good job and the children love it. Amy passed her a thick book. I just wish this mass exodus would stop and people would settle down so the school can be filled once more. Right now, I have only 3 classes with less than 20 students in each class. My fear is that by the end of the year, I might be teaching empty desks. It was true that people had been leaving purity in droves in the past few months because of the insecurity and feeling that the town was headed for a downfall. When the former pastor had been kidnapped, shot, and left for dead, it had shaken the whole community because he was a well-liked man. Pastor Matthew, his wife and 4 children were now in hiding because he had lived, and everyone thought he could identify his captors and whoever had shot him. We'll continue to pray that things settle down. With all that's been going on in purity, it's going to take a miracle for people to stop running away. Everyone is scared that the town has been overrun by criminals. Those who stay and try to build a life for themselves soon find that they are facing a lot of challenges. And just about 2 or so, Days ago, the body of that poor man was found in the dump behind the morgue. Candace picked up a book, then tossed it onto her pile. Before I came here, slightly over a year ago, I was made to believe that this was one of the safest places on earth. But just weeks later, it was like hell was let loose on this town. What's worse, food is so expensive and rents have tripled because Carlton Swindle owns nearly all the buildings in this town. People sold to him and took off since they were not only running away from the insecurity, but also possible starvation. Amy, it's thanks to you and Rowan that those of us left behind are able to afford food because your prices are very fair. We try as much as possible, though it's really tough, given that people decided to become prospectors and forsook farming. It costs us a lot to bring foodstuff from Boise or Cascade, but we're thankful for the trains. Kate shifted, getting on her knees to better access the crate she was working on. What would I have to do as a teaching assistant? Since I'm the only teacher so far, your work will be taking care of a class for me when I can't be with them. I'll give the lessons and then homework, and as they are doing it, you will watch over them. This will give me the chance to move to another class and give them their lessons also. I don't like to leave any of the classes unattended because children can't be trusted to do the right thing if they're not being supervised. But doesn't that leave the third class without supervision? Candace shook her head. Pastor Sam has been very helpful. On top of all his other duties, he helps out at the school. He said he would do it until things settle down and we have more teachers. So that means all 3 classes are covered. That's if you'll accept this job. Kate? I'll give it a try, but I don't promise I will know how to do everything correctly. I've never taught children before and really don't know what's expected of me. And I won't expect you to learn everything all at once. But if you find that you want to make a career of teaching, I have the necessary training materials which I brought from Boston with me when I came. We can't afford to pay you much because... And Day shrugged. Amy and Rowan are paying me good money and have given me a room in their home, and I don't have too many needs. What if I volunteered for now and then? When things get stable again, we can revisit the issue of a salary for me. Candace looked at Amy, who nodded. Rowan and I won't charge Kate any rent for now because she helps out at the store. When would you want her in school? Starting on Monday, if that's not too soon. Right now, school is in session only between 9 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. That's because we don't want the children to come in too early or leave too late. We also don't come in on Saturdays and Sundays. Kate, what do you think? Kate turned to Amy. Would it be all right for me to start working at the school on Monday? Yes. Rowan and I can manage at the store. Those are good hours. Kate turned back to Candace. It will give me the chance to help out at the store in the mornings before I come to school and also in the evenings when I get back home. Then that's settled. Why don't you come by early on Monday so I can introduce you to the children? I'd like that very much. And for the first time, Kate felt renewed hope in her heart. Chapter 3. A Child in Trouble. Caleb sipped his coffee and tried not to stare at the beautiful woman seated across the desk from him. His treacherous heart threatened to beat right out of his chest. Kate Lander was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, but right now, her face showed deep anxiety. He hadn't been able to get her face out of his mind from the time they had rescued her from Kelvin Holland's basement. Miss Lander, what can I do for you? He put his cup down and leaned forward. I don't know what else to do. Kate was wringing her hands. I just don't want any trouble with anyone. Ms. Lander, you're safe here in the office. Now tell me what's going on. It's one of my students. She started and noticed the blank look on Caleb's face. Sorry. Candace gave me a job as a teacher's assistant at the new school. You mean Good Hope Academy? Yes, that's the one. Go on. I've been there for about a week and noticed that one of the little boys seems to be an abused child. What do you mean? His name is Stanley Dawson, and he's 7 years old. When in class, he sits alone in the corner and the other children don't play with him. Have you told this to Candace or Pastor Sam? I know, I should have, but I don't want to seem like I'm stirring up trouble for the little boy. That's why I wanted you to find out if he comes from an abusive home or something. Do you know his parents? Kate shook her head. Not really. His mother walks him to school every day, but she stands far off and waits for him to enter the compound, then leaves. In the afternoon, she is usually waiting, but also at a distance. I've tried to meet her so I can speak with her, but she refuses to talk to me. What's more, she also looks like she is afraid, and I thought that she and her son might be living with someone who terrorizes them. What's this woman's name, and do you know if she works at all? I looked at Stan's file and found out that her name is Felicia Dawson. But I have no idea if she works or not. Ms. Lander. Please call me Kate, Deputy. He gave her a smile that took her breath away. In that case, then I'll also request that you call me Caleb. Thank you. As I was saying, thank you for bringing this to my attention, and I promise that I'll look into it. If Felicia and her son are victims of domestic violence, I'll make sure it ends and they're safe. Kate rose to her feet, and Caleb walked her to the door. Thank you, Caleb. I'll come by the school to see you, he said, and then felt a little foolish when I have something to report. He finished hurriedly. Kate was so intent on getting back to the store that she didn't notice the man who was following her. It felt good to have shared her fears with Caleb, and she knew that he would do all he could to make sure Stanley and his mother were all right. Amy was on the store's veranda and waved at her as she climbed up the steps. Where have you been? School let out at 3 and it's nearly 4:30. I was really worried about you. I'm sorry to have worried you, but I needed to see Caleb about something. The deputy sheriff. Amy pushed open the store's door, and the bell tinkled merrily. I hope no one is bothering you, Kate. No, Kate said hastily, pulling an apron from behind one of the shelves and preparing to help in the store. This was the time when they got a lot of customers, people who'd finished their other business in town and were on their way home. It was just something about one of my students. Amy frowned. Shouldn't you be talking to Candace or Pastor Sam about that? That's what Caleb said. Kate felt her face turning red when Amy gave her a knowing look. It's nothing like that, but I'm worried about one of my students. What's wrong with the child? His name is Stanley Dawson, and I fear that he and his mother might be suffering abuse at the hands of someone, probably a male relative or something. Why would you think that? The look in their eyes, the fear, and the fact that Stan doesn't have any friends at school. He comes to school very early, at least an hour before the other children, goes to his corner and sits there with his head bowed down. He doesn't answer questions in class, and once or twice, I've seen him crying. And in the afternoon, when school is over, he rushes out and is first out of the gate. I tried to speak to his mother, but she looked so scared and practically ran away from me. That's why it's important to tell Candace and Pastor Sam about this. If anything bad is happening to those two, they're the best ones to deal with it. I didn't think of it that way. Don't worry. Amy gave her a wink and lowered her voice. Deputy Caleb is a handsome man, and I don't blame you for seeking him out. I've noticed that he comes in here a lot. Maybe he's trying to find a way to ask you out. I'm glad you seem to be moving on after that terrible ordeal." "It's nothing like that," Kate protested, blushing furiously, and was glad when the bell tinkled, signaling the entrance of a customer, and Amy went to serve the person. Chapter 4. Blackmailed. The blazing saloon was in a shady part of Purity. On one side of it was the town's public morgue, and next to it was the blacksmith's workshop. But it seemed to be a popular place because people were coming and going, and Kate could hear loud laughter coming from inside. It was only 3 in the afternoon, and she'd come here straight from school. She shouldn't be here, but she had found out that Felicia Dawson worked in this place, and she was concerned. Stan hadn't been to school for 4 days, and she was worried about him. What if he and his mother were badly hurt, and no one knew about it? It was Rowan who had let on that he knew Felicia and that she worked at this saloon. Kate pushed the door in slowly and nearly choked on the thick smoke. A fancily dressed saloon girl whose face was heavily painted walked up to her and smiled. "Welcome to the blazing saloon. Miss, how may I help you?" She looked Kate up and down. "You look mighty fine, and the men will be happy to get fresh meat. Are you looking for Madame Blazing? Do you want to become one of her girls?" Keeping herself from shuddering in disgust, Kate pasted on a smile. "Sorry about that, miss, but I'm looking for someone else." "Oh, you're one of those—" The saloon girl's tone was dismissive. "Excuse me?" "A wife coming here to look for her man." The woman snickered. "Well, honey, unless you're prepared to walk from room to room searching for your man, I'm sorry I can't help you." "No, I'm not looking for my man, but one of my students." This time, it was the other woman's turn to stare at Kate. "Your student." "We don't allow children in this place." Kate gave a small laugh. "I'm sorry, but I came to look for Miss Felicia Dawson. Her son, Stanley, is my student and hasn't been in school for the past 4 days, so I got concerned. I just need to know that he's fine." Oh, shudders seemed to go up in the woman's eyes. "I haven't seen Felicia in days, too." Maybe she decided to take some time off. Kate wasn't convinced that the woman was telling the truth, but she was getting quite uncomfortable at the lewd stares she was getting from the saloon's male patrons. "Thank you," she said, hurrying out of the saloon and bumping into someone who righted her. She tried to shake herself free. "Kate, what are you doing here?" Oh, she nearly collapsed in relief when she realized that it was Caleb. "This is one of the most dangerous places that you can be, and I don't want you coming here, especially if you're alone." "It's just that I had to do it. Stan hasn't been to school for the past 4 days, and I got concerned. I also found out from Rowan that Felicia Dawson works here, and I was coming to find out what the problem is." "And did you speak to her?" Kate shook her head. "No. The girl I spoke to told me that she hasn't been in for a few days." Kate! Caleb walked her to the store. "I don't want you putting your life at risk like that. You asked for my help, and it would be better if you let me do the dangerous stuff. That saloon is a terrible place, and you were lucky Madame Blazing didn't come upon you asking about one of her girls. She's very fussy and could have hurt you." "I'm sorry," Kate said. "It won't happen again." "Good. Now, you concentrate on taking care of your students and leave all the sleuthing to me. If you find out anything more, come and find me, and I'll look into it, okay?" "Yes." "Good. Now, I also received some information about Felicia and was on my way to speak with her. I guess I'll have to find out where she lives so I can go there." "What information?" "Felicia Dawson came to Purity 2 years ago as a mail-order bride, But something happened, and she ended up working for that lousy woman. Pastor Sam told me that he's been trying to reach out to her, but she keeps to herself and refuses to open up to him, or anyone else for that matter. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help. Thank you. Now, no more unsupervised visits to such places. Amy and Rowan would be quite concerned if they found out what you're doing. Please don't tell them, Kate said hastily. I promise I won't go there again. Kate was dusting the shelves on a Saturday afternoon when the bell tinkled. Amy and Rowan were upstairs because she'd told them to take the afternoon off. Business was slow, and she felt that the two needed some time alone. She didn't see the customer who came in at first, and then when she did, wished she had stayed out of sight. What are you doing here? She demanded, making sure she kept as much distance between them as she could. Is that any way to greet the man who brought you to purity and was your fiancé? I don't want any trouble from you, Kelvin. Please leave me alone. The last time I checked, this was a general store where everyone is welcome to come and get whatever they need. Then I'll go and get Amy or Rowan so they can serve you. Kelvin gave a wicked laugh. Dear girl, you'll do nothing of the sort. You see, you made me spend a lot of money on you, and then you turned around and betrayed me. I sent you money which you never paid back. Betrayed you? Yes. You were supposed to pay me by being a nice woman. He stretched out a hand to touch her, but she flinched and dashed behind the till, making it impossible for him to come after her. Don't be like that. He laughed unkindly, clearly enjoying her discomfiture. What do you want, Kelvin? Money? Oh no, you won't get off that easily. It's my regret that you and I couldn't have been more. He rubbed his chin and gave her a look that made her skin crawl. How had she ever thought that this was a decent and charming man? She must have had blinders covering her eyes, but they were now off, and the person standing before her was anything but charming and decent. You need to leave before Amy and Rowan get here. I'll leave when I'm good and ready. And as if to show that he was in control of the situation, he leaned against the counter. You and I have some unfinished business. You kept me locked up in a cage like an animal for 7 days, and I think that makes us even. Oh no, you still owe me, and so you will do as I say. Or what? Or I'll tell everyone in purity that you're nothing more than a loose woman. She turned pale and he laughed. Yes, everyone thinks pretty Kate Lander is a nice girl, but wait and see how they will act towards you when I tell that you gave me plenty of, let's say, a good time. And now I hear that you're teaching at that nice church school. Imagine what the good pastor will say when he realizes that you're nothing more than a whore. I'll tell people that you and Madame Blazing's girls are not so different after all. That's not true, and you know it. Nothing happened between us. It's your word against mine, darling. 7 days of no one knowing where you were or what you were up to is enough to arouse their suspicions. All I need to do is whisper a few choice words into the right ear, and your reputation will be shot to pieces. And you can then say goodbye to the idea of finding a respectable man to marry you. I've seen the deputy sheriff sniffing around here, and believe me, one word in his ear, and he'll treat you like the rubbish in the dump behind the jail. So, do we have an understanding? What do you want? Kate felt cornered. In 2 days' time, you'll go to Blazing Saloon and pretend to be a customer there. I can't go to that hellhole, says the woman I saw walking into the same saloon 2 days ago. Kelvin said sardonically. Dear girl, you looked very much at home in that place, and I expect you to do as I say, or else even these wonderful folk that have taken you in will kick you out on the street. Kate didn't say a word. When you get to the saloon, you will sit in a place I will show you. Why? Patience, dear girl, patience. I have to get back to work now, so just say what you have to and leave. There are some people who are doing me wrong, and I want to know what they're planning. I'll meet you on Tuesday night and take you to the saloon where I'll show you the place to sit, and you'll pretend to be there to pick up a man for a good time. I'll arrange for someone to meet you there, so don't even think about backing out of this deal. You will sit with him and do as he says, and after that, you will both leave and come to my house and report to me what you heard. Why are you doing this to me? Kate forced herself not to cry in front of the wicked man. Because, dear girl, there's so much at stake. You see, there are two kinds of people here in Purity. The first kind are those who will do anything to get by, including breaking the law. The second kind are those who are trying to settle down and make this town a pleasant little haven. Now we have to coexist side by side, and that's where you come in. I'm just a businessman who has been wronged, and I want my revenge. You, on the other hand, are the bridge that will bring that revenge to pass. Once I have the information I seek, I will leave you alone. His words sounded insincere, and Kate knew that this was just the first of many wicked plots the man would involve her in. But it was true. He could tarnish her name since, as he said, for 7 days she had been in his house. Would people believe her word against his, and could she take that chance? Go away then, she said. Where do I find you on Tuesday then? In the alley behind Blazing Saloon at around 10 in the evening. Make sure you come alone, and if you try to betray me, you'll find that there's another side to me that you won't like. She believed him because he had kept her chained and locked up in a cage in his basement for 7 days without food and very little water. Kelvin Holland was as wicked as they come, and she wasn't going to try and cross him. Don't even think about telling that little pup about this. It's our secret. He winked at her as he walked out of the store, leaving her quite shaken. Chapter 5. Courting Trouble. Caleb was getting annoyed with himself. He was behaving like a lovesick teenager and not a man in his mid-20s. He showed up at the store with the flimsiest excuses, and even his uncle had begun to wonder at all the unnecessary groceries he brought to the house. Even though he didn't say a word, the raised eyebrows told a story of their own. Kate Lander had consumed him, and he knew that he had to get a hold of his feelings before he made a total fool of himself. But he was also worried about her because he'd been by the store earlier that day and she had looked really tense. It was Tuesday afternoon, and they had laid the unfortunate Jean-Pierre to rest in the public cemetery. Sabrina Howe alias Misty Lewis alias Annabelle Morris had been released because there wasn't anything tying her to the man's murder, but the sheriff had instructed her not to leave town just in case new evidence came up, and she was needed. Though she had made the promise, Caleb doubted that she would stick around for long. He had also been by Felicia Dawson's house to check on her, and the boy and the woman had told him through the closed door that she was fine. He shared his concerns with his uncle, who told him to keep his distance. Felicia Dawson works for that blazing woman, and the last thing you want is to be involved in their messes. If the woman doesn't want her son to go to school, then no one can force her. Also, if she needs help, she knows where to find us. Kate was quite worried that the woman and her son are being abused. Like I said, she knows where to find us if she needs help. She will eventually come. Even if we try to force our way into her house to question her, she may not tell us anything, and that will only create bad blood. When the woman is tired of the abuse, if that is what is happening to her, she will find a way out, believe me. Caleb had to agree with his uncle, even though he couldn't help but feel that he had let Kate down. Rising to his feet, he put his holster on and walked towards the door. There were no prisoners in the 2 cells, and he felt like he needed to patrol around the town. "Where are you off to?" his uncle called out from his office chair. "I thought I would just hit the streets to make sure no one is getting into any mischief. If you happen to pass by the Mercantile, the one owned by Gunter and his wife Amy, get me some coffee." They had enough coffee in the house, and Caleb smiled at the not-so-subtle teasing. "I'll do that, Uncle." He was chuckling as he left the office. Tonight was the night, and Kate wanted to cry. Why had she agreed to help that wicked man at all? He would never stop tormenting her, and by agreeing to do what he asked, she was only enabling him. Yet what other option did she have? She couldn't tell Amy or Rowan, because they probably would march up to Kelvin and demand that he stop bothering her. There was no telling what he would do should that happen, and she didn't want anyone to talk about her whether it was false or true. She would do as he asked, and then make it clear that she wouldn't help him again. The bell tinkled, and when she looked up, it was Caleb. He had a smile on his face, and the tenderness in his eyes nearly caused her to blurt out her dreadful secret. But she didn't want to see him recoil from her in disgust. "Good afternoon, Caleb." "Good afternoon to you, Kate." Caleb looked around the store. "Is there somewhere we can talk?" Before she could answer him, the door opened once again and Kelvin came in. "The good deputy is here for some supplies, I see," he said as he entered the store. Caleb felt that he was mocking him but refused to rise to his bait. "It happens," he turned to Kate. "Please give me 1.5 pounds of sugar, 1/2 pound of coffee, and that sweet-smelling washing soap you have on sale. Please pick them from the shelves, and I'll run up your tab." Kelvin waited until Caleb was out of sight, and then he turned to Kate. His eyes were as cold as a serpent's, and she shuddered inwardly. "Not a word to that pup," he said in a low voice. "I'll be waiting for you at 10, and don't keep me waiting." Caleb heard the bell again as the door opened, and when he came back, Kate was alone. "I don't trust that man," he said, noticing that she looked shaken. What did he want? "Nothing." She swallowed as she ran his tab and told him how much he owed. "Kate," Caleb looked at her strained face. "Is that man threatening you in any way?" She stared, and he knew that he was on the right track. "I don't know what you mean." She looked for some brown paper to wrap his purchases in. Caleb decided to let it go for the moment, but purposed to keep a close watch on Kate and Kelvin. That man hadn't bought anything, but he'd left Kate, looking quite shaken. Something was happening, and he was determined to get to the bottom of whatever it was. "Well, I'll be on my way now." He pocketed his change and picked up his package. "Pass my regards to Amy and Rowan." "I'll do that, and thank you for stopping by." It was a cloudless night, and the half-moon was up. Kate waited for Amy and Rowan to fall asleep before she slipped out of the house. She made sure that she had a small knife, just in case she would need it, but prayed that she wouldn't. Kelvin Holland was a criminal, and she was sure that the kind of people he associated with were not any better. As soon as she was out of the house, she wanted to go back where it was safe, but her future depended on this. She would do what he wanted, and then if he continued to threaten her, she would tell Amy and Rowan. Using the back alleys because she didn't want to run into anyone who might see her and ask what she was doing out so late, she was soon a short distance from the rendezvous point. "Dear Lord, please keep me safe," she murmured as she made ready to step into the dark alley. Someone brushed past her, startling her and nearly knocking her off her feet in his haste He had on a thick coat and large hat, and all she could tell was that he was a large man. Pausing to catch her breath, she nearly went back home, but then she heard a soft groan a few feet ahead of her. "Help me!" The person called out, and Kate forgot her fear and anxiety. "Where are you?" she asked. Peering in the darkness, she could see some bins that were used for rubbish and realized that the voice was coming from behind one of them. "Call out. I'm coming to help you." "Here," the person said, and she walked forward, nearly tripping over the person's feet. "Who are you?" "My chest. Get the knife out," the person said, and she recognized the voice, staring down at the gleaming knife that was embedded in the man's chest. She could hear loud yodeling coming from the saloon, a clear indication that even if she called out for help, no one would hear her. "What are you doing here?" Kate was afraid to step forward. "Get this knife out of me before it kills me," Kelvin said. Now, Chapter 6. Who stabbed the blackmailer? "Miss, get on your feet right now." The sheriff's gruff voice sounded from somewhere in the dark above her. Kate thought she was dreaming. She'd been lost in her thoughts as she wondered how to help Kelvin, who was slipping in and out of consciousness. That she hadn't heard the sheriff approaching. He shone the lantern in her face, momentarily blinding her. "I said, get on your feet and raise your hands in the air." "I didn't do it," she whispered hoarsely, even as the magnitude of her situation hit her. "I was trying to help him." She looked up at the sheriff. "I was just trying to save his life." "The question is, what are you doing in this dark alley at this time?" Frank couldn't believe that he had found his nephew's love interest in this place, and she was in a terrible situation. Caleb stepped out of the shadows and stared down at Kate, who was still on her knees, her hands poised above Kelvin's chest. "Kate, what are you doing here?" Her heart sank when she saw the look on his face. He thought she had stabbed the man. "Someone brushed past me when I was coming into the alley, and he seemed to be in a hurry." Kate looked down at Kelvin. "Kelvin, please tell the sheriff who stabbed you." "Sheriff?" the injured man called out. "Thank goodness that you're here," he said. "This woman is mad. She was inside the saloon, and when I asked what she was doing, she said she was there to meet with me and enticed me into following her into this alley, and then she took me by surprise and stabbed me." "You're lying." Kate was nearly in tears. A woman stepped out of the saloon, assessed the situation, and then started screaming. Her screams brought people pouring out from the saloon, and some brought lanterns with them. Caleb quietly raised Kate to her feet, then produced a pair of handcuffs and secured her hands behind her back. Kate couldn't believe that this was happening to her. Meanwhile, Kelvin was still telling the story of how Kate had lured him out of the saloon and stabbed him in the chest. Caleb realized that the only way to keep her from being lynched by the mob that was braying for her blood was to take her down to the jailhouse. These were drunkards and prostitutes. Kelvin's crowd, and they were annoyed that one of their own had been attacked. "Let's go," he said in a quiet voice. When Kate would have resisted, he sighed. "It's for your own protection and safety," he said, gently leading her out of the alley even as the sheriff kept the crowd engaged, no doubt to give them time to get away. "I didn't do it," Kate pleaded with Caleb. She really wanted him to believe her. Caleb didn't know whether to be angry or disappointed with Kate. "I told you never to go into that saloon alone, but you wouldn't listen. I was afraid of something like this happening, and now there's nothing I can do because the sheriff is now in charge of this matter." Chapter 7. Guilty or Innocent. Pounding sounds invaded her dreams. Kate struggled to sit up through layers of sleep, groaning at the discomfort she felt. The little cell was dark even though she could see the faint light from the sheriff's office a few feet away. The narrow cot wasn't built for comfort, and as a prisoner, she couldn't expect any. The pounding continued, and Kate realized that it was coming from outside. Someone, and she guessed it to be Caleb, opened the door, and her heart skipped a beat when she heard Amy's voice. "I've come to report that Kate Lander is missing," Amy was saying. "When we woke up this morning, she wasn't in her bedroom, and her bed hadn't been slept in all night." "Amy, Kate is in the holding cell," Caleb interrupted her. "What?" "I had to arrest her last night." "From the house? We had dinner together and all went to bed, so how did you come to arrest her?" "Kate wasn't in the house when I arrested her," and he lowered his voice such that Kate could only hear murmurs. Finally, footsteps came towards the cell, and she sat up, but her eyes were averted because she was too ashamed to look at Amy. "Kate, what's going on?" "I had to go." She started crying. "I didn't know what else to do." "Lower your voice because I don't want Caleb to overhear what we're talking about," Amy said. "Do you mean to tell me that you actually stabbed Kelvin?" "No, I didn't do it, Amy." "Then what are you doing here?" Caleb's heavy footsteps came towards them. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Gunter, but the sheriff says it's best you two don't talk. You might just end up on the end of a rope yourself if you're not careful." "Caleb, please," Amy begged, but he shook his head. "What the sheriff says is the law around here, ma'am." He avoided looking into the cell for his heart was breaking. He still didn't understand Kate's continued connection with Kelvin, and right now he wasn't in the best of moods to hear anything more. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave. If you want to help your friend, you better find a solid witness who can vouch for her because Kelvin Holland has identified her as his attacker." "Caleb, I'm disappointed that you would think Kate would do something like that," Amy said, her voice full of disapproval, but she didn't argue when he let her out of the jailhouse. "Please, Caleb, help Kate." "Look, Amy, I tried to help Kate, but she seems to have a fascination for that man." "What do you mean?" "He came into the store yesterday afternoon when I was there, and they talked. Kate looked slightly agitated, and I asked her if the man was bothering her, but she said she was all right. Then last evening, as the sheriff and I were on patrol, someone rushed up to us and told us that someone had been stabbed and was lying in the alley behind the saloon. When we rushed there, we found Kate kneeling over Kelvin and there was a knife in his chest. Thank goodness the wound wasn't that deep. He is being treated by Doc, but he is bringing charges against her. When he's discharged, he is coming here to give us his statement." "Do you want to tell me that you believe that evil man's word over Kate?" Caleb ran a hand tiredly through his hair, ruffling it up. "Honestly, I don't know what to believe anymore, Amy. If Kate was in trouble, shouldn't she have told you and your husband? As it is, she snuck out of the house when you were asleep, so what does that tell you?" "That she was desperate and didn't want to alarm us." Caleb merely shrugged. "I'm going back inside. Like I said, if you want to help your friend, get her a good attorney." "Caleb," Amy tried to call out, but he simply shrugged and returned into the jailhouse, and she stared at his retreating, back then sighed and turned to go back to the store. Chapter 8. Gathering Evidence. Amy didn't stay away for long, and when she returned to the sheriff's office, Candace was with her. Sheriff Frank was also present, and he leaned against the wall listening to them as they spoke to Caleb. "Caleb, we're here to help Kate in any way that we can. She's insisting that she is innocent, but Kelvin is still saying that she was the one who stabbed him. After you left here, I went to find out how he was doing, and he told me the same thing. Kate was in the saloon and she lured him out into the alley, then stabbed him. I know it looks like the man is telling the truth, but tell me this. Looking at Kelvin, he's a tall, broad man, and Kate is slender. Surely do you think she was capable of overpowering him and stabbing him? Don't you think someone else did it? Amy's questions seemed to take the sheriff by surprise, and he stepped forward. "What do you mean?" he asked, a slight frown marring his brow. "You mentioned that someone told you that Kelvin had been stabbed, leading you to rush to the alley where you found him. Isn't that right?" "Yes." "Who was this person?" "Perhaps if you found him, for I presume it was a man, he will tell you the truth." Caleb and Frank looked at each other, but it was the latter who spoke. The man came out of the darkness and stayed in the shadows. He looked slightly uncomfortable at admitting that. "We didn't get the chance to look closely at who it was. What if he was the one who had stabbed Kelvin and then so happened to bump into Kate and decided to let her take the fall for this? That may be true, but it still doesn't explain why Kate was in that alley at that precise time that Kelvin Holland was stabbed. Those two have a history and bad blood between them, and everyone knows that he was the one who brought her to purity. It's also a known fact that the man kept her in his basement for 7 days, and now people believe Kate stabbed him out of revenge. Look, before you charge Kate, please let us speak with her." "Go ahead," Caleb said. "I'd really like Kate to be absolved from this accusation." He looked miserable, and Amy nodded. "We'll do our best." Kate told the story as it was. "I found Kelvin lying on the ground," she concluded. "I didn't stab him. Someone else did. As I was entering the alley, a big man, rushed past me, and I think he might have been the one who stabbed Kelvin." "Kate, what were you doing in the alley at that time?" Candace asked. "Remember what I told you about keeping secrets from people who care about you?" Kate nodded. "I don't want to scold you, even though you deserve it, but I'd like some reassurance that you'll never do something as foolish as this. That man clearly hates you and wants to humiliate you as much as possible. By agreeing to his terms, you're just enabling him, and one thing you should know, blackmailers never stop." "I know that," Kate said miserably. "He said he would tell everyone, including Pastor Sam and Caleb, that he and I had had illicit relations, and I was afraid." "No one would have believed that wicked man over you, Kate," Amy said. "I've been telling you that you were the victim and shouldn't have to be afraid. If you had told me or Rowan, we would have dealt with that man. I'll never do it again. We'll do all we can to help you. And right now, I want to request the sheriff to let us post bail for you. I don't want you staying in this cell for a single minute more than is necessary." Chapter 9. Follow Your Heart. Caleb wanted to reach across his desk and pull Kelvin up and force him to tell the truth. After ensuring that he wasn't in any more danger, Frank had brought him to the office so he could write out his statement. "That man is lying," he growled, and his uncle chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Love was a strange thing indeed. Don't be such a hothead, Deputy Newton," Frank said in a soft voice so it was only Caleb who heard him. "We can work another angle on this." Kelvin was talking to his lawyer who had come in, and he was repeating the story that it was Kate who had stabbed him. "He's telling lies, Uncle," Caleb protested. "Yes, he is, but I don't want to agitate him in front of his lawyer. I'd like for the man to leave, and then I will have a good talk with that lousy man. Meanwhile, let's keep this silent because I'd really like to use this opportunity to shut that den of evil down. Madame Blazing has no scruples and has been luring young women into town using Kelvin. They must have had a falling out, and this was her revenge. But those are powerful people, and unless one of them cracks and talks, we don't have any evidence. So I'd like to carry out my investigation, but without alerting anyone. That woman, Felicia Dawson, if we can get her on our side, she might tell us plenty about what goes on in the saloon. Is that the woman you tried to help, and who wouldn't speak to you? Caleb nodded. I'm sure if we promised her protection, she might just tell us about Madame Blazing and her establishment. That's one way of looking at it, but don't count on it. Amy reminded me that Carlton Swindle was one of those who had tried to get Kate to compromise her virtue. She even suggested that he might be the kingpin behind this whole mess in Purity. That makes sense. Caleb had a thoughtful look. But where's the evidence? That's exactly what I asked Amy. Without evidence, we can't accuse anyone of any crime. We just need someone to roll over on Madame Blazing, Swindle, and anyone else involved in the evils of the brothel and saloon. Do you think if you pressed Kelvin Holland hard enough, he would talk? Criminals have a strange code between them, and it isn't easy for a hardened one like Kelvin to give his buddies up. But let me try. Someone tried to kill him. Perhaps you could use that as leverage. Promise him protection and see if he talks. Once the lawyer was gone, Frank asked Caleb to lock the door. He had told the lawyer that he needed Kelvin to give a detailed statement in writing. Since the lawyer was representing someone else in court that morning, he had to leave. But you have no right to question my client without me being present, he said as he was leaving. Any statement Kelvin gives, when I'm not here, will be deemed to have been acquired through coercion, Sheriff. Don't worry, Mr. Pipper. We won't go anywhere near your client apart from requesting him to give us a statement. The charges against Miss Kate Lander are serious, and we want to be sure that we get all the facts right before we send the woman to court and jail. But they weren't smiling when they approached Kelvin, who had been shown into the sheriff's office to write down his statement. If you write a single untruthful word in that statement, things won't go well for you. Kelvin, Frank said, just rest assured that I have every right to keep you locked up in this place for at least 6 hours. On what charge? Obstruction of justice, Frank said. You're a big man and that young woman is no match for you. She couldn't have stabbed you, and if you don't tell me the truth, I'll send word to Madame Blazing that you said she was behind your stabbing. No. Kelvin looked really scared, and Frank knew he had him where he wanted him. Was it Kate Lander who stabbed you? Kelvin shook his head. It wasn't. Then who did? I stepped out of the saloon, and the man came out of nowhere. I didn't have time to defend myself, and he stabbed me. Listen here. Caleb had had enough of the man. We know all about the blackmailing you were trying to do to Kate Lander, and she is bringing charges against you. I'll do whatever you want. Well, Frank rubbed his chin thoughtfully. There's something you can actually do. Chapter 10. Against all odds. So, this is what is going to happen. Frank's face was as hard as flint, and the man standing before him shivered. He looked very formidable, and if he was to get out of here alive, he would have to keep his head. You'll write down the truth about the person who tried to kill you, or you'll be in a lot of trouble. Is that clear? Kelvin nodded. Was it Miss Lander? It wasn't Miss Lander, Kelvin blurted out, shaking inwardly. The person who stabbed me was a man, but I didn't see his face. Frank looked at him through piercing eyes and laughed shortly. It's clear that you're lying, and you know who your assailant was. But that seems to be a personal matter, and I really don't want to get involved in your shady schemes. However, I want you out of purity or you'll feel the full force of the law." If Frank expected any protest from Kelvin, he was disappointed. The man seemed almost happy and relieved that he was being kicked out of the town. That's when Frank realized that Kelvin was in more trouble than they had previously thought. No wonder that the man had had no objections when he was hauled to the jailhouse, right from docks. He was running from someone. "I know that you've crossed some very powerful people and they are coming after you. I don't need any trouble in purity because I have enough to deal with. But to show you that I'm human, I'll make sure to put you on a train in the late hours of the night so that no one will know. I'll tell anyone who asks that your buddies broke you out of jail and let them make whatever they want of that. What you do once you get out of purity is your problem. But just note this. If you ever set foot in this town again, I'll make sure you're tried to the full extent of all your crimes, for they are many. And then you'll hang. Is that understood?" Yes, Sheriff. Trouble was gone, and it was time for him to make things right with Kate. Caleb told his uncle where he was going and got his blessing, then made his way to the store. Kate was alone, and he wanted it that way. As he entered the store, he was trembling inwardly, though his demeanor was calm. "Kate, can you ever forgive me?" "For what?" "For doubting you. I should have believed you because you're too sweet and gentle to hurt anyone." Kate gave him a shy smile. "I'm sorry, too, for not listening to you. I put you in the situation of thinking that I was a suspect. I'm just glad that you're all right and out of jail. But that's not what I came to talk to you about." He waited for her to say something, but she was silent. "Kate, you know that I've been coming here with the flimsiest excuses, and you know why." "No, I don't," she said in a low voice. "But you do, my darling." She looked up sharply. "I love you and have been trying to find a way of telling you that." "You can't love me, Caleb, not the person that I am." "Are you referring to Kelvin Holland's lies? I overheard you telling Amy and Candace what he had threatened you with so you would carry out his wicked mission. I would never have believed his word over yours, Kate." It's so difficult. Kate didn't know what else to say. Caleb had admitted that he loved her, and she wanted to shout her response from the rooftops, but was afraid. What if she was dreaming and all this was just an illusion that would fade away as soon as she tried to embrace it? "I don't deserve this, and I don't know what to do." "Kate, all you have to do is give us a chance." And then he held out both hands as he walked towards her. "You have nothing to fear anymore, for your adversary is no more. We arrested him for obstruction of justice and we're keeping him in jail." "Kelvin is dead?" "No. He broke out of jail and fled in the night. He pretended to have a stomachache and the runs and kept asking to go to the outhouse. He got the chance to flee, and we tried to pursue, but it seemed like he had outside help. What if he comes back?" Caleb shook his head. "My love, he's now a wanted fugitive, and the last thing he'll dare to do is show his face here. Not only that, I have it on good authority that he fled with his business partner's money, lots of it. They're looking for him, and he'll want to go as far away as possible and hide. You have nothing more to fear." As his large hands engulfed hers, warmth suffused her, and she felt safe for the first time in a long while. It was pure and simple joy to know that this man would never willingly or knowingly let any harm come to her. He'd fought for her, and she was now free. "Kate, I love you so much and want you to be my wife." Oh, Caleb, there was no more resistance left within her. She had to trust, to give her heart to him so she would be free. "I don't know what to say." All you have to say is yes, and let me take care of the rest." He touched her lips with his thumb. "You're so special, and I know that I want you with me for the rest of my life." And she could finally tell him how much she loved him, and she did. Part 2, Edict. The story of Marigold Pritt and Franklin Goodwin. Prologue. And dear Lord, please protect our law enforcers. Grant them the strength to fight the evils that threaten our society without any fear. We especially send out our petition this afternoon for Sheriff Franklin Goodwin, his deputy Caleb Newton, and other law-abiding citizens who from time to time are called upon to form a posse to fight crime in purity. Lord, please keep them all safe and protect them. Where they find themselves in situations they're unable to deal with, send them help from above and fight for them. Let it be known that you are God in purity, dear Master. We have no other to turn to and pray that you'll hide us under the shadow of your wings, as it's written in Psalm chapter 91. Pastor Samuel Kidder kept silent and looked at the other two people in the church sanctuary that Friday afternoon. Ever since arriving in Purity, he, Zechariah, and Hannah Hunter had taken to spending Friday afternoons in intercession for their town. They were holding hands and weren't ashamed of tears rolling down their cheeks. "The Lord will hear our cry and petition," Zeke said softly. "Let's not stop crying for this town, as he says in Isaiah chapter 62. Let us cry out and not give him any rest until he makes purity a praise in this land once more." Chapter 11. The Gruff Sheriff. The rock above him splintered into thousands of fragments, and he winced as one of the shards struck his chin hard, drawing blood. He was pinned down, and his attackers were determined not to let him walk out of this situation alive. Sheriff Franklin Goodwin had been in many tight situations before, but this one looked like it was the worst of them all. If he came out of this alive, it would be because of a miracle, and he would know that someone, he had no idea who, was praying for him. Checking both his revolvers, he realized that he only had 2 bullets left in each. 4 bullets, and there were 6 men out there. How had he let his guard down and let them best him? Frank leaned his back against the rock to rest. Dawn was breaking, and he couldn't stay here forever. This had to end at some point. 4 bullets were all he had, and he was going to use them well. The other 5 men weren't his main concern. It was Oscar Proctor who was his target, and had been from the beginning. Oscar was the much-dreaded man who ruled Purity and the surrounding towns with terror. He had a long, jagged scar on the back of his right hand, and Frank was trying to arrest him for the horrible attack on Pastor Matthew a few months ago. Young Todd Delaney had identified him by his scar as the man who had given him a coin to get the pastor out of his house under false pretenses. When Reverend Matthew had stepped out of his house, Oscar and one of his men had grabbed him, dragging him off to one of the caves in the hills. It was just by God's grace that they had found the preacher man who'd been shot in the neck and left for dead. He was not only Lawson's right-hand man, but he was also his younger brother, and the one who carried out his dirty work. Of Lawson, there was no sign because he was a wanted fugitive in more than 3 states and stayed hidden in the shadows. The bounty on his head was now nearly $10,000, and Frank had to deal with bounty hunters and vigilantes who wanted that prize. They were a nuisance, always crawling through Purity in pursuit of the bandit, but there was nothing he could do about them. Everyone knew that Lawson and the mayor were friends and concluded that it was the reason the man could never be found to arrest. But Frank was determined to bring Oscar in at any cost, if it would make Purity safer, and he was sure that once he had the man in custody, it would be easy to find out where his brother was. Just that morning, he'd received a tip from one of his new informants that Oscar was hiding out in the hills. The source hadn't mentioned that he had other bandits with him, and Frank had foolishly gone out in pursuit, without a posse. Everyone knew that Oscar operated alone, and that was the assurance that Frank had had when he went to confront the bandit. But when he walked into a group of 10 bandits, he realized that he'd been deceived and managed to shoot 4 of Oscar's men, wounding them fatally. But he'd also taken heavy fire and managed to escape up into the hills. His horse was dead, shot out from under him, and the bullet had narrowly missed his leg. If he died after killing Oscar, then his death wouldn't be in vain. Gunfire sounded once again, but this time, Frank noticed that it wasn't aimed at him. Clearly someone had come to his rescue, or else the bandits had turned on each other. He rose slowly so he could look over the rock he was hiding behind so he could see what was going on. He heard the snapping of a twig and turned just in time to see Oscar aiming his gun at him. The 2 men stared at each other for a single moment and then pulled their triggers at the same time. Frank then felt a sharp pain in his chest and darkness overcame him. Frank opened his eyes warily. Through the haze of his pain and bone-weary fatigue, he made out muffled voices on the other side of the wall. Smiling through his pain, he struggled to sit up, but then felt like his chest would explode and fell back helplessly against the pillows. He felt weak, but glad to be alive. After being treated by Dr. Robert Whiteman down at the small hospital, he'd refused to be admitted because he knew he wouldn't be safe in the hospital, and he couldn't ask his nephew to post a guard outside his door. Better the sheriff's quarters, which was better suited for safety and security than the open halls of a hospital. Purity Memorial Hospital was new, but it lacked most of the important amenities like well-trained staff, and what was worse, even Dr. Whiteman avoided working from there most of the time. Purity wasn't safe anymore, and most of the cases brought into the hospital were gunshot wounds. One man had even been finished off in the hospital by an enemy who walked in pretending to be family. Frank groaned as he tried to turn so he could lie on his side. He hurt all over, but it was better than being dead. The other 5 men had been killed by Caleb and the other members of the posse, and only Oscar managed to escape. Had Caleb and his posse not arrived in time, Frank would most certainly be dead. He had hit Oscar in the chest. Of that he was sure, even though Caleb didn't find the man. However, they noticed a trail of blood and followed it from the scene of the shooting, but then it ended close to the road, and they concluded that he'd gotten onto his horse and ridden away. The bullet that had hit Frank's shoulder just above his heart had gone through, and his left knee was also badly bruised from when he fell after being shot by Oscar. But according to Dr. Whiteman, he would be up and about in less than a month's time, as long as he didn't overdo it. Kate and Caleb were fussing over him, and for someone not used to laying down doing nothing, it was hard, but he was really trying to be the model patient. A soft knock sounded at his door. "Come in," he called out, and Caleb stuck his head into the room. "Uncle, how are you feeling?" "I'll live," and against all the pain that threatened to rip his chest apart, he sat up. His brow and upper lip were covered in sweat at the exertion. "Any news on Oscar?" Caleb shook his head. "He's laying low, but I fear that he may come up with more mischief." "We'll be waiting for him." Frank's lips tightened. "I'm not going to live in fear again, Caleb. This town needs the protection of its sheriff, and that's what I'm going to give Purity. I'll fish out all the bandits right from the top on down. We will clean up this county." Dr. Whiteman said, "No exerting yourself." "I know, but I'm going to get better and go after Oscar. I won't let him escape to another county and become another sheriff's problem. This all ends here in Purity." Caleb wondered if he should tell his uncle the laced rumors that he'd heard. Frank had always been very perceptive. You're wrestling with yourself on whether to tell me something. Caleb chuckled. Uncle, you're very shrewd and nothing gets past you. Speak, son. One of my informants told me that Lawson is planning something now that his brother is out of commission. Be careful of informants, Caleb. I trusted one of them and got myself into this predicament and almost got killed. I was waiting for you to get better, so you can deputize some more men to keep vigil. There are good men and women in purity who want to see all this crime come to an end and are willing to give up their lives. I've been thinking about that too. Why don't you get me a list of prospective deputies and we'll conduct interviews together? 2 more men will give us the strength we need, and whenever we have to pursue other criminals, we can always deputize others, even if it's only on a temporary basis. Footsteps came towards the room and stopped at the open door. Tut, 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 Kate said, shaking her head disapprovingly. I asked you to do one thing, Caleb, and now here you are agitating Uncle Frank. My love, Caleb tried to appease her, but she was having none of it. I sent you to find out if Uncle was awake so I can bring him something to eat. You know that he's still very weak, and we're not supposed to talk about any disturbing matters with him. Now, go and prepare his chair for we need to get him out of bed. Dr. Whiteman recommended lots of exercise, so he will get better quickly. Yes, dear, Caleb said, winking at his uncle as he left to do as bid. And you, stop making it so easy for Caleb to burden you with work. I don't want you to have a relapse. Kate, dearest, you worry too much. I'm getting much better. You didn't see yourself when you were carried into the hospital by Caleb. There were tears in her eyes. I was so scared that you weren't going to make it through the first night. Kate, Frank's tone was serious. I'll be all right, thanks to your husband and also your tender, loving care. And I promise that I won't deal with any burdensome matters. Kate gave him a piercing glance and then nodded. I know you will, but all I ask is that you don't overexert yourself. She left the room, and Frank thought of how blessed he was to have those 2 taking care of him. Kate was a different woman from the one she'd been just a few weeks ago when she was being blackmailed by the man who had lured her to purity under false pretenses. Kelvin Holland was gone from purity, and Frank hoped that he would never hear of the man again for as long as he lived. Kate made his nephew happy, and that was important to him. He'd written to his sister, Caleb's mother, and told her about the 2 of them, and she promised to visit sometime in the near future to meet her new daughter-in-law. Chapter 12. The Widow Pritt. Marigold Pritt looked down at her 2-year-old son nestled in her arms. She loved her sons with her whole heart, and that was why she was doing this. Starting a new life in a place hundreds of miles away from home was frightening, but it was also the right thing to do. Life had been so tough since Jim's death slightly over 2 years ago. He hadn't even been there when Micah was born. Her little boy would never know his father, but maybe it was all for the best. Colby was staring out of the window of their second-class coach, counting the passing trees, and whenever he spotted an animal or person, would call out. The 2 seats facing each other were at the end of the coach and next to the lavatory, which was quite uncomfortable. But she'd been lucky to secure them. No one else wanted to secure them. No one else wanted to sit that close to the washrooms, so they pretty much left her alone. But Colby didn't seem to mind the discomfort. His head being glued to the window, that kept him busy, and Marigold hoped that her new employer would be kind to her and her children. Even though she didn't have much money, she had opted to take a second-class coach, so she and her sons would be safe. Madame Blazing, her prospective employer, had sent her $100 for the train fare, and she'd added some of her own money to it so they could travel in comfort. It was a long journey, and she didn't intend to get there when she was completely exhausted. The director of the agency which had found her the job in Purity had told her that she would be provided with private quarters, and she was looking forward to making a good home for the three of them. "Mama! See? Engines!" Colby shouted excitedly, pointing at a group of mounted people in the distance who were watching the train. "Many of them, Mama." The people on the opposite aisle smiled at Marigold. She didn't want to get friendly with anyone because the last thing she needed was some stranger striking up a conversation with her. Her sons were keeping her busy, and she didn't need any distractions. Marigold shuddered slightly, praying that they weren't hostiles who might possibly attack the train. Traveling out to the west was becoming safer because the trains were better built and faster, but there were still incidences where bandits or Indians attacked them. Passengers would be lucky if the gang hitting them was only after money and valuables, for they would soon be gone after grabbing whatever they could get their hands on. In most cases, they never harmed anyone. But then there were those vicious ones who left death, brokenness, and destruction in their wake. They would plunder, ravish, and murder even small children, not showing mercy to anyone. But the train passed into a tunnel, and when it emerged on the other side, after traveling nearly a mile or so, she didn't see the Indians, and her heart settled down. Placing Micah down on the opposite seat, she stretched her arms as far as they could go. In the night, one of the porters would come and pull the seats together to form a comfortable bunk bed for them. There was a folded bunk above their heads, but so far since they embarked on this journey, no one else had come to occupy it. According to one of the porters, they were a day away from Purity, and she would be glad when they got there. Her meager resources were nearly depleted because feeding two healthy boys, small as they were, was quite expensive since she had to depend on food from the dining car. She thought about buying stuff from the stations they passed, but she didn't trust the hygiene of the food handlers. The last thing she wanted was to arrive in Purity with children suffering from diarrhea or cholera or typhoid. The train's food was safer even if it was more expensive. "I'm hungry, Mama," Colby yawned. "Is there anything to eat?" "We'll go to the dining car for something in a short while," Marigold said in a low voice, not wanting any of the other passengers to overhear her. She wanted to time their last meal on the train with their approaching Purity so she wouldn't have to feed the boys again. This was clearly going to be their last meal until her new employer would feed them, since she had just enough money to cover it. "Mama." "Colby, I heard you. Why don't you sleep like Micah, and then when you wake up, we'll go and get some food to eat." "Okay, Mama." And he obediently stretched himself next to his brother and was soon asleep. Marigold took Colby's place at the window and looked out. It would soon be dark, and then she would lower the drapes on her side. They were fancy, and she knew she was lucky to be here, but she also regretted the fact that she had no money left. She and her sons were safe and comfortable, unlike the passengers she'd glimpsed getting into the third-class coach. They were squeezed tight, and the 4 coaches were overflowing. She wouldn't have been able to take care of her sons properly amidst the overcrowding. She was looking forward to getting to their destination so she could settle down with her boys. Of the nearly 30 passengers in the second-class coach, it was only them and an elderly couple who were alighting in Purity. The rest were going on beyond, most to Seattle. But she knew that the third-class coaches were filled with young women who were traveling to the West as mail-order brides, and she wished them well. The joys of being young, she thought. Where had her youth gone? She was only 23, and already she had 2 boys, all because she'd been so infatuated with a man who turned out to be so different from what she'd imagined. As she thought about the young and eager women headed out to meet husbands they'd never seen, but only corresponded with through letters, she prayed that none of them would end up in the mess she had. Chapter 13. Trouble for Sure. Franklin carefully unlocked the front door, nudged it open with his good shoulder, and then stepped back to let out the stale air. The house reeked of rot and abandonment. It had belonged to Brian Court, a once prosperous farmer who had fallen on hard times and lost everything. Brian had abandoned his home without a second thought because he was heartbroken. The man had nearly gone mad when his wife of 6 years ran out on him, leaving him with 2 children. Then, just 2 weeks later, Angela's body was found, lying at the bottom of the ravine, by a hunter. Rumor was rife that it was Lawson who had committed the dastardly act, but without evidence, there was nothing the law could do. Frank was sure the criminal was behind Angela's death because it was rumored that he had been her secret lover. Without evidence, however, there was nothing Frank could do to put the man behind bars. Purity was a place where one needed to be very careful, and people were terrified. Though the mass exodus had stopped, a few families still left town each week. But new people were also arriving almost daily from the east, and it was because of them that the sheriff was determined to clean up the town and the whole county if possible. People deserved to have good homes where they would feel safe, and currently, Purity was far from that. Brian's sister had come from Seattle and convinced him to relocate. His main worry had been his 20 acres of land and this house. Frank had offered to take care of the man's property, passing by every 2 days to check on it. That was nearly 4 months ago. Then, just this morning, Frank received a letter from Brian. He wanted to sell the property, but didn't want Carlton Swindle to hear of it. Carlton? Frank's lips tightened. How had he ever imagined that he could be friends with that demented man? He was sure Swindle was somewhat involved in the ambush that had nearly killed him a few weeks ago when he had an altercation with Oscar Proctor. The informant who'd led him into the ambush had since disappeared from Purity. After living in the town for close to 8 months now, Frank had come to love it and couldn't imagine living anywhere else. After Caleb and Kate got married, it was a wake-up call for him. He wasn't getting any younger and needed to put down his roots. As a newlywed couple, Kate and Caleb needed their privacy, and the sheriff's quarters they shared had become too crowded for the 3 of them. Frank needed to think and take a step concerning his future, because he knew that his days as sheriff of Purity were numbered. Idaho was headed for statehood, and Frank was sure that Swindle would fight him if he tried to run for sheriff again. The first time, he had been directly appointed by the man because Swindle thought he could control Frank. And for a while, he had. But then Frank had looked around and saw the trust that people had in him, and things had changed, and so their enmity had begun. Right now, there was an uneasy truce between the 2 of them because of the upcoming mayoral elections in a year's time. Swindle was already campaigning, albeit silently, and he didn't want to ruffle any feathers. Frank knew that he, as the sheriff, had the support of many of the people in Purity, but Mayor Swindle fought dirty, using force and threats to intimidate anyone who would dare oppose him. With a sigh, Frank stepped into the house and was immediately alert when he heard the rattling sound. The only light came from the doorway, as the windows were boarded up and he couldn't see much of the room. His keen sense of direction had him quickly whip his revolver out and fire into the corners of the house. Then he jumped back outside. "What's going on, Sheriff?" Frank quickly turned around to find Pastor Sam walking up the porch steps. "I saw you riding towards this place and followed you since I knew it was empty. Given what you've been through, I didn't think it safe for you to be alone in case you were coming to confront vagrants who might have taken over this house in Brian's absence. Then I heard the gunshots. Yes, Frank put his gun back into its holster. Dealing with a rattler, and since I didn't know how many were in there, I decided to shoot into all the corners. Do you know if you got it or them? Frank shook his head. The room is poorly lit, and I don't want to accidentally step on it, especially if it's injured. There could be a family of them in there. He shuddered visibly. Have you heard from Brian? Yes. Just this morning I received a letter from him. He's settling down in Seattle and now wants to sell this place because he's never coming back. Poor man. Yeah, very unfortunate circumstances. I just wish there was something I could do for him. Why don't you consider buying this property? As a fair man, you'll give Brian a good price for his property, unlike if our good mayor got hold of it. It's a big house. The thought pleased Frank. What would I do with a 4-bedroom house? Bring your nephew and his wife to live with you. They're your family, and this is much better than living in the middle of town, where criminals have easy access to you. Then 1 or 2 of the new deputies can have the premises you currently occupy. Good idea, very good idea. Now that we've settled that, why don't I help you get the planks off the windows so we can open them to see better? We can do it from the outside where we won't run the risk of dealing with those creeping and crawling things inside the house. You read my mind, Frank grinned at his friend. Chapter 14. Who Will Save Me? Marigold stared at the buxom woman standing in front of her at the train station. The woman had pounced on her as soon as she'd alighted from the train that was just leaving the station now. Madame Blazing sent me to bring you back to the establishment, the woman said. Shall we get going? The woman was chewing something which Marigold suspected to be tobacco, and she turned and spat on the ground, making Marigold grimace. I don't understand what you mean by establishment. Is that how you refer to homes in this part of the country? What don't you understand? I was sent here to meet and bring a housekeeper called Marigold Pritt back to her. Is that you or not? She leaned forward, forcing Marigold to take a step back. Her breath reeked of tobacco, and her teeth were black from years of using the substance. Colby was clutching at Marigold's skirt, and Micah had finally fallen asleep. They were all tired and hungry, and she longed to sit down and rest her weary body. Micah could be heavy when he was asleep, and her arms were getting numb. Yes, but I thought I was going to work in someone's house and not an establishment like you say. Marigold knew what establishment meant, and especially given the kind of person who'd come to meet her. The woman stared at her for a moment before her lip curled up in a sneer. I don't got all day to stand here yammering away. Madame Blazing said you was to go straight to the saloon. Marigold felt like the walls were crashing down around her. She had left Bravia, New Jersey, for a new start and a better life for her children. She wasn't going to compromise her faith or her peace. Working at a saloon in whatever capacity wasn't what she had envisioned. That was not the kind of life she wanted to be involved in. No, I'll not go with you, and saying that, she took Colby's hand and walked to one of the benches. She was tired. Her back hurt and she longed for a bath, sleep, and a hot plate of food, but not necessarily in that order. Her trunk lay a few feet away from them, but she wasn't worried about anyone stealing it. It was battered and old and didn't contain much of value except their clothes. Whatever she thought of as valuable was in the small purse tucked under one arm. Mama, I'm hungry. Colby's trembling voice made Marigold want to cry, The obnoxious woman had left in a huff, and she hoped that it was the last time she would be seeing her. "I know, my love." She bent down and kissed his forehead, gently ruffling his hair. "We'll soon be out of here, and you can then have all that you want to eat." "I have to go to the station." Frank made the announcement to his 3 deputies. At Caleb's urging, he'd commissioned 2 more men to help with the workload and to keep the peace in purity. "Are you following up on a case, Sheriff?" "Do you need our help?" Caleb walked over from his desk, and Frank smiled inwardly. After his last near-tragic encounter with a bandit, Caleb had become more of his bodyguard than his deputy. The young man meant well, but sometimes Frank felt stifled and needed some time away from all the smothering. "No, and you can relax, Caleb. I'm just going to see Giles. The old fellow has been talking about taking his retirement and moving to Portland to be with his daughter, but somehow I don't think he wants to go." "Oh no." Caleb picked up a file from his uncle's desk. "If Giles leaves, what will happen to his position as station master?" Frank placed his Stetson on his head and took a deep breath. Getting a station master isn't all that difficult. It's finding a good man with integrity that is. The moment any civil positions fall vacant in Purity, Swindle rushes in to place one of his men there. It's like he wants to control the whole county. "Uncle Frank, do you think you can convince old Giles to stay on until a proper replacement is found for him?" Frank shook his head slowly. "I don't know. But the last time I met with him, the poor man looked really flustered. He said it was nothing when I asked, but I have a feeling that he was hiding something. This town and everyone in it really needs a break from this wave of crime and living in fear." Howard Brooke, one of the new deputies, said, "I just wish something would happen to make the criminals know that God is on our side, so we can be free and live in peace." Freedom comes at a cost. A wise man who lived about 100 years ago said, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." Frank's face became serious. "Well, I for one will not sit by and do nothing anymore. The time to act has come, and I'm going to offer Giles the protection of this badge." He touched the star on his chest. "And boys, thank you for taking on this job. It's tough, and I can't always guarantee your safety. But I know that God is watching out for us." He said this remembering the time he'd been pinned down by 6 criminals and got out alive. Chapter 15. Enticing Offer. "Giles, you don't have to leave. Purity is a good place. You've said so yourself so many times." The middle-aged man shook his head. "I've lived here for the past 12 years, and it's been a good place. But I gotta go," he insisted. "When the time comes to move away, a person ought to do just that." "All right then," Frank said. Turning to look at the nearly empty station, the next train was expected in 5 hours' time. "But could you please do me a favor?" "What is it, Sheriff?" "Could you maybe stay on for like 4 weeks as I search for someone to take your place? We don't want vagabonds rushing in to take your place and messing the town up." Giles had a thoughtful look in his eyes. He scratched his white beard. 4 weeks, you say? Do you have someone in mind?" "Not really, but I'm hoping that someone suitable will have come by then." "I'll see what I can do, but no more than 4 weeks, Sheriff. I've about taken all that I can, and a person can only deal with so much." His words caused Frank to realize that there was something more than just retirement going on in Giles's life. But this wasn't the time to delve into the matter since something else had caught his attention. "Who's that person?" He pointed at the figure huddled on one of the benches. "It looks like a woman." She got off the train that came in about 4 hours ago. Shouldn't she have left for her destination by now? Probably whoever is supposed to come and pick her up is delayed, or they mixed up the train schedules. Whatever the case, no one should be out here alone, and especially not since it's getting dark. I'll go over and find out what the problem is. He took a few steps in the direction of the woman. Frank, there was an underlying note of desperation in Giles's voice. Yes, Giles. Frank turned around to look at the older man. Is everything all right? Never mind, the man waved him away. Go and check on that woman. Frank was torn between finding out who the stranger on the bench was and trying to persuade his friend to open up to him. He chose the former because, as sheriff, it was his duty to ensure that everyone was safe in his town. Having a woman at the train station and sitting alone meant that she was in trouble of some kind. In the past, he dealt with cases where young ladies arrived from the East as mail-order brides, but for some reason or other, their intended spouses ended up abandoning them at the station. Some of them opted to take the next train back home, but others stayed and found work or new spouses. He needed to know what was wrong, and he could always talk to Giles later. At least the man had agreed to stay for 4 more weeks. Even though he'd only known Giles for 4 months, they had become good friends as they now attended the same church. He was sure that Giles had wanted to tell him something. Ma'am, you shouldn't be out here on the platform alone, he said when he drew closer. Her stomach looked bulky, and he thought she was pregnant, and especially not in your condition. Where do I go? Marigold raised a tear-streaked face to the man whose badge revealed that he was the sheriff. She couldn't help noticing that he had kind brown eyes. Wasn't there anyone here to meet you when you arrived? She gave a small, nervous laugh. I came out here because some woman needed a housekeeper, but I didn't realize what kind of place I would be working at. Now my boys and I have nowhere to go. Your boys? Marigold raised the thick coat, and he saw a small boy who was fast asleep on the bench. The pregnancy turned out to be another child strapped to her chest. Colby and Micah, she pointed at each of her sons, and my name is Marigold Pritt. Mrs. Pritt, I'm going to have to ask you to come to the jailhouse with me until we can sort this issue out. Do you have any other luggage apart from this? He pointed at her battered trunk. She shook her head. This is all the luggage I have, she said, starting to rise on her feet. Colby woke up and started crying. The sound was so pitiful and weak that Frank got concerned. What if this woman and her children were ill and an epidemic broke out? Is the boy ill? He asked, and she shook her head. What's wrong with him? We're so hungry. Marigold swayed on her feet. We haven't had a proper meal for nearly 14 hours. Here, sit down before you swoon. Frank quickly helped her back to the bench. Stay here for a short while. I'll be right back. As he hurried back to his horse to get his water canteen, he noticed Purity's most notorious saloon owner walking into the station. She paused and looked around, and when her eyes lighted on Marigold, she started walking towards her. Frank decided to leave the water issue for now and followed the woman, getting there just in time to hear the brazen woman issuing a threat to Marigold. What's going on here? He looked from one to the other. Madame Blazing seemed annoyed to see him there. This young woman made a promise to come and work for me, but I sent Matilda to get her, and she refused to come. The woman sneered. She probably thinks she's Queen Victoria of England and has to have an entourage to escort her to her new job. Madame Blazing. This woman has children, is tired and clearly. She wasn't well informed about the kind of place she was coming to work at. I spoke with her a few minutes ago, and she told me that she doesn't intend to take you up on your offer of a job. Then she has to settle whatever I sent her for her train fare. How much was it? While the question was directed at the saloon owner, Frank was looking at Marigold. She sent me $100. Frank reached into his pocket and drew out his wallet. Madam Blazing, I have $40 here and promise that before the end of the week, I'll bring you the rest of your money. He held the money out to her and she grabbed it, sighing loudly. Some people are so inconsiderate, she hissed. Where do you expect me to find someone who will do your job now? Chapter 16. Faith Overcomes. This will be your new home until you find a place to settle down, Frank told Marigold as he opened the door of the house. He recently bought. Don't worry about a thing, okay? She nodded. Thank you. Tears filled her eyes as she stepped in after him. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Think nothing of it. He gave her a quick smile. Kate will be here shortly to help you settle in. There's plenty of food in the pantry, and you can go ahead and help yourself. Thank you, she said again, looking around the large living room. This was clearly a house built for a family, which raised the question, where was the sheriff's wife? He wasn't old, but neither was he young, and she expected that there should be a Mrs. Goodwin. Kate will show you the bedrooms, Frank said. He would have done it himself. But somehow, it didn't seem right. Rest all you can, for I know you need it. Which was true. She appreciated the fact that the sheriff had provided a place for her and her children to sleep last night, but the cell certainly offered no comfort. Her weary body begged for rest, but she had to take care of the boy's needs first. I have to return to the office. Don't open the door for anyone unless it's Kate, okay? Yes, and even though she found his instructions odd and longed to ask him why she should keep the doors locked, she refrained from doing so. After all, he was the town's law enforcer and knew the place better than she did. In any case, she had no desire to meet any more unpleasant characters. Madam Blazing and her minions were quiet enough. Has Marigold settled in okay? Caleb asked his uncle as soon as he stepped into the jailhouse. I believe so, but she is one very scared woman. And with good reason, too. Madam Blazing isn't known for being kind to people, and she seems to have really wanted Marigold to work for her. That Blazing woman relies on finding women who are so desperate that they practically become her slaves. Consider all the women who work for her. Most of them are those who were unfortunate to have landed in purity with no prospects. Some were abandoned by the people they came to be with, and with nowhere else to go. They ended up in her clutches. I'm trying my best to end this abuse of women, especially, but... He was cut off mid-sentence when bursts of gunfire alerted him to the fact that there was trouble outside. Frank and his 3 deputies were immediately out the door. What's going on? He asked. No one in particular, but didn't need an answer when 5 masked men came riding down the street, shooting in the air to scuttle anyone who might dare confront them. People were diving under carts and darting into buildings to save their lives. As the men came towards Frank and his deputies, the one who seemed to be the leader pointed his gun at a young man who was paralyzed with fear and just stood there, staring helplessly at him. Frank swiftly drew his own gun and fired, hitting the man's hand and causing his gun to fall harmlessly to the ground. "Let's go," the injured man shouted, and the 5 took off, leaving dust in their wake. "Should we pursue them?" Caleb asked. "No, we're grossly outnumbered, and I don't want any trouble." Frank said this because he had recognized the leader of the pack. It was Lawson, and the man was vicious. If they confronted him without being prepared, it would end up badly for him and his men. A cry went up from somewhere down the street, and the four men rushed towards the sound. It was coming from the Rushford family bank, and Frank went in, leaving the other three to make sure all was all right outside the bank. "He's bleeding badly," a woman said, pointing at someone lying on the floor. Frank recognized him as Henry Rushford, the bank manager and son of the founder of the institution. He was bleeding from the neck. Rendering as much help as he could, he was glad when the bleeding stopped and the man regained consciousness. After arranging for Caleb and Howard to take the man to Dr. Whiteman for treatment, Frank asked Simon Wells, the other new deputy, to watch the door as he interviewed the witnesses. "Did anyone happen to catch a glimpse of the robbers?" he asked. Everyone averted their gazes, and some even tried to leave the bank. He knew they were terrified because they had probably identified the robbers. No one in Purity was ever willing to testify against Lawson or his gang members because they would be attacked, either at home or at their businesses. "Look," Frank tried to reason with the witnesses. "There were about 10 people in the bank. If we are going to clean up Purity, we all have to work together. You as the public are our ears and eyes, and I'm sure someone must have seen something." His piercing gaze went round the room, but still no one said a word. What made most people scared of Lawson was how he had men everywhere. Frank was sure that 1 or 2 of those posing as clients in the bank were there to make sure that no one said a word, and if anyone dared come forward, they would mark the person and harass them later. So he let it go for the moment. Seeing the clerk huddled under a desk, he approached him. "Monty, how much money did they get away with?" "Nothing, Sheriff." Monty rose to his feet. "They tried to gain access to the back room where we keep the safety deposit boxes, but Mr. Rushford stopped them. That's when the leader shot him." Frank frowned. It was odd for robbers to break into the bank and leave without taking any money. "How many boxes are in there, and do you know the owners?" Monty shook his head. "Only Mr. Rushford has access to the boxes, and there are about 200 of them." "So you have no idea which one was specifically targeted?" "No, sir." "I'll need a list of the owners of those boxes, but I guess you don't have it." "No, sir. Mr. Rushford is the only one who can provide you with that information." "Very well, then," Frank nodded. The robbers were after something in one of the safety deposit boxes, and he was sure they would be back. But he wasn't going to let that happen. It was time to call in the big guns. Chapter 17. Opening his heart. Coming home to a hot meal. And the sound of children's laughter ought to have scared him, but Frank found it refreshing, especially because of Marigold. For propriety's sake, he'd asked Caleb and Kate to move in with him, just until he found a solution to Marigold's problem. Marigold. The woman had broken down the walls he'd erected around his heart years ago, and he found they couldn't imagine going a single day without her. He wanted to make Purity safe for her and the 2 boys who'd also wormed their way into his heart. And he knew that Micah and Colby loved him, for as soon as he got home each day, they were all over him. Once he'd changed out of his work clothes and changed into some old clothes, he immediately picked Micah up, and Colby took them outside. Caleb joined him a few minutes later. "You seem like a contented man, Uncle Frank." Caleb's tone was full of teasing. The 2 men were seated on the porch watching the sun as it set. Inside, the 2 women were preparing dinner, and they could hear the laughter amidst the tinkling of crockery and dishes. Colby was racing from one end of the porch to the other, making all manner of sounds, while Micah was nestled in Frank's arms, watching his brother and cheering him on whenever he came close. "You look like a very happy father." Frank gave his nephew a sad smile. After I buried Samantha and my twin girls 10 years ago, I vowed never to open my heart again. It's too painful to love someone so deeply and then lose them. That was really a dark time in my life. Uncle, you're still in your prime and can love again. Frank took a deep breath. That's my greatest fear. Loving again. I couldn't bear it if something bad happened to those that I love. Uncle Frank, every day when I wake up, I take the time to look at Kate for a long time as if to commit her face to memory. In these uncertain times, I have no idea what the day will bring or if I'll see her again after I leave the house. But I have no regrets about marrying the woman I fell in love with. Seize the day and leave the rest to God. We can't stop loving because we're afraid of losing the ones we have feelings for. I don't know if I can do that. I keep seeing Sam's lifeless body between those of my daughters. All gone, taken from me when I wasn't there. I should never have gone on that mission that took me away from her. I came back to find that Sam had died giving birth to our daughters who lived only a few minutes after her. I should have been there with her. There was nothing you could have done about it, even if you had been there. Uncle, doctor said it was malaria that caused Aunt Sam to go into premature labor. There was nothing you could have done to prevent that from happening. But I should have been there with them in the end. I was on a mission being a soldier. His tone was bitter. While I was out there keeping other people's wives and children safe from the Indians, mine were dying alone. Uncle Frank. No, it's all right, Caleb, he interrupted. He looked down at the boy in his arms and then the one running around. I never expected that these little boys would make me feel what I'm feeling. He didn't want to mention his feelings for Marigold. It's called love, Uncle, and being a doting father. Marie, can I ask you something? Kate's voice caused her to raise her head. Sure, go ahead. What do you think about Uncle Frank? Marigold frowned. I don't understand your question, Kate. She was 3 or 4 years older than Kate, but the two of them had become really good friends in the few days they'd been living under the same roof. I don't know Uncle Frank very well, but I can see that you and the boys bring him so much joy. Marigold stopped mashing the potatoes and shifted uncomfortably. But Kate apparently wasn't finished. Uncle Frank isn't a very easy man to understand, but he has a good heart. He may seem gruff and unapproachable, but underneath all that is a very sensitive man who truly cares. I always believe that children and dogs make the best judges of character, and your boys adore him. Why are you telling me all this, Kate? Because Caleb and I were talking about how wonderful it would be if you became our aunt. What? Think about it. You and Uncle both lost your spouses and are alone. You would make good companions for each other and curb your loneliness. Marigold gave her friend a small smile. But I'm not lonely, for I have my sons. Her face reddened when Kate raised an eyebrow. And don't give me that look. Children can never take the place of a spouse, Marie. One day, Micah and Colby will grow up and have spouses of their own. Do you think you'll be able to live alone after that, or will you turn into one of those mothers who cling on to their children and cause havoc in their marriages? Marigold shrugged. Many women have done so. But you don't have to. Marigold knew that what Kate was saying was true, but she didn't want to have to confront her feelings right now. Frank made her feel safe, which was something she hadn't experienced in a long while. Let's not talk about that right now, she said at last, placing the mashed potatoes into a large dish, then covered it. The men out there are hungry and we need to serve them dinner. Kate laughed. You can dodge the topic all you want, Marie. But one of these days, you'll have to wake up to the fact that you need a good husband and the boys need a father. Chapter 18. Casting Out Doubts. Frank couldn't sleep, and rather than toss and turn in bed all night, he decided to go and get a book from the living room. Everything was silent as it should be, and he smiled. His loved ones were safely asleep. But as he stepped out of his bedroom, he thought he smelled smoke. "What's going on?" he muttered as he drew his frayed gown around him. An explosion had him racing back into his room, and he grabbed his gun belt. As soon as he got to the living room, he noticed the brightness outside and realized that one of the barns was on fire. "Caleb, Kate, Marigold," he shouted, banging on their bedroom doors. The two barns were empty, but his fear was that the fire might spread to the house because it was quite windy outside. The three joined him in the kitchen. Marigold had Micah in her arms. "What's going on, Uncle?" Caleb looked towards the burning barn. "How did the barn catch fire?" "I don't know. Someone must have deliberately set it on fire since it's really dry now. The place went up in flames. I need to go and check." "It's too dangerous," Marigold blurted out, then blushed when Frank turned to look at her. "If someone set the barn on fire, then it means they are waiting for us to get out of the house so they can attack. What if that is the plan, to draw us out and then ambush us?" "Marigold has a point, Uncle," Caleb agreed. "We can't risk running out like that. Someone or people could be waiting to harm us. We can't just sit here doing nothing." Frank felt frustrated. If the fire gets out of control because of the wind, it could spread to the house and then we'll be burned alive. The sound of shattering glass made them turn around. "What was that?" Kate asked fearfully, moving closer to her husband. "Colby." Marigold screamed, rushing out of the kitchen with Frank close behind her. Her bedroom was at the back of the house, and she slipped through the door that she hadn't closed when she went out. At first, they didn't see anything in the darkness. "There!" Frank shouted, just as a shot rang out. He pushed Marigold out of harm's way, ducked and lurched at the intruder. Marigold screamed and Caleb and Kate came running. All they could hear were grunts as the two men struggled in the dark. Colby woke up amidst all the commotion and started crying. "Mama!" Marigold tried to rise to her feet from where she'd fallen after Frank pushed her down, but found that her knees were very weak. So she crawled out of the room. Micah was still in her arms, and when she got to the corridor, Caleb helped her to her feet. Colby. It surprised her that Micah had slept through all the commotion. "I'll get him," Caleb said. He wanted to light a lantern, but was afraid that someone else might be outside, and they would be easily visible. Uncle Frank was a strong man. He scooped the boy up into his arms and rushed back out and handed him to Kate. "Go to our bedroom," he told the two frightened women. "Lock yourselves and the boys in there and don't come out until this is over. Kate, have my rifle close by just in case. If someone other than Uncle Frank or I enters the room, shoot first and ask questions later." The two women nodded fearfully and did as bid. Frank knew he couldn't let the other man get away. This time, he was going to have the upper hand. Thinking about how the intruder might have harmed Colby put new resolve in him, and with one final blow, he heard the man grunt, and then his body slackened. "I got him, Caleb. Find me some rope with which to bind him." "Yes, Uncle." "What do you think is happening in the other room?" Marigold was pacing the floor. "Can you hear anything?" Kate had her ear to the door. "No, all is silent," she whispered. The two boys were once again asleep. Kate had placed them on her bed. Marigold had a heavy vase close by, just in case she needed a weapon, and Kate had propped her husband's rifle next to the door. The lantern was on, but the wick was low. They heard footsteps like someone was running, and then a second set. "Let's hold hands and pray," Kate said, and Marigold nodded. "Lord, please keep our loved ones safe." It was nearly 10 minutes before they heard Caleb call out, "You can come out now. It's all over." Kate quickly opened the door and with a cry, flung herself into her husband's arms. Marigold also didn't think twice about moving into Frank's waiting arms. "I was so worried," she said as she felt his strong arms around her. Frank couldn't believe how close they had come to losing their lives. What if he hadn't awakened when he did? "I'm all right and glad to know that you care." He bent down and spoke into her ear. "Marigold, why are we playing games?" "I don't know what you mean." She tried to move away, but he refused to let go. "Oh, my dear girl, but you do." Chapter 19. A Ready-Made Family. The 3 men who Caleb and Frank subdued were marched through the streets to the jailhouse. It was early morning and the streets were still void of ordinary citizens. Only drunks and prostitutes returning home were to be seen, and they paid no attention at all to them. It was just how Frank wanted it, so as not to draw the wrong kind of attention to themselves. "We'll be out in a jiffy." One of the thugs jeered at Frank. "You can't keep us here, for we know people in high places who won't let this happen." "We shall see about that," Caleb said hotly, but caught his uncle's eye and decided to keep silent even as the 3 men mocked them for being weak. "The law enforcers in Purity are nothing but puppets," the second man said. "You will soon know who owns this town." "You can't keep us locked up for more than a day," the first thug said as they were put into one cell and Frank made sure it was well secured. "Just know that when we get out of here, there will be more trouble for you." Frank chose to ignore him and signaled his nephew. "Go back home and make sure the women and children are all right. Howard and I will manage here, and I'll send Simon on an undercover mission to find out who these men are and who sent them." "Yes, Uncle." Frank waited until his nephew had left, and then he sent the second deputy on an errand. Once they had left, he walked to the cells and stood before the 3 men. "You tried to burn down my house, but failed. I know you think you're invincible because you have connections to highly placed people in Purity, but rest assured you shall be tried and hanged for attempted murder." The leader just laughed and even spat on Frank's boots. "Good luck with that," he said. "If anyone will be in trouble, it's you." Frank just shook his head and walked back to his desk, even as Howard returned. It was getting harder to convict criminals in Purity because every time he tried, some fancy lawyer would swoop in from out of town and get the man or men out. But not this time. Frank's lips tightened. These 3 hoodlums had put his family in danger, and they were laughing about it. Even now, he could hear their loud discussion about what they would do to Frank and his family once they were free. It was as though they knew that they would be able to get out of jail with nothing but a slap on the wrist. "Hey, Sheriff, why are you so quiet out there? Cat got your tongue." Frank didn't bother responding even as the prisoners continued mocking him. "Sheriff, why do you put up with such behavior?" Howard's face was hard. "Just say the word and I'll knock some sense into the heads of those numbskulls." "No, let them be. They are so disrespectful to you, Sheriff. I have to do everything by the book and follow the law, even though I want to use force against those men." Frank felt frustrated. "I can't afford to make a mistake that will allow them to be released." "But they will just walk like the other thugs in this town who have never received a conviction." Not this time, Frank said cryptically. I'll make an example of these three so that other criminals lurking around in purity will know that the law is not to be mocked. Justice may be delayed, but it will eventually win. How will you do it, Sheriff? It's quite obvious that these men are backed by powerful men. Well, let's just wait and see. Frank didn't want to divulge too much information to his deputy. Even though Howard was a hard worker, Frank still didn't trust him fully. Let's just say I'm not letting this one slide. I think I have to leave, Marigold told Kate later that morning, after they had cleaned up the house. Caleb was replacing the broken window in her bedroom, and the boys were playing in the living room. Because of the early morning incident, Marigold was loath to let her boys out of her sight, and she kept an eye on them, even as she made ready to prepare their lunch. Why? You've only been here for about 2 weeks. Did you find someone else to work for? Marigold shook her head. Then why do you want to leave? Are you going back to New Jersey? I have to leave because it's not safe for us to be here. Are you referring to what happened early this morning? Something like that. Marigold looked away so Kate wouldn't see that she wasn't telling the truth. You know something, Marigold. You remind me a lot of Caleb when he isn't telling me the entire truth about a matter. So the younger woman came and stood in front of Marigold, my dear friend. What are you hiding from me? She held her by the shoulders so she couldn't turn away. Speak now, dear girl. Nothing, Marigold mumbled, but turned bright red when Kate made a sound to show her disbelief. Look, we may not have known each other for long, but I feel like we owe each other some respect. What is really going on? It's nothing I can't work out. Marigold. Oh, all right, Kate. You sound just like a prosecutor. I'll tell you just so you will stop nagging me, but you have to promise me that you won't tell your husband or uncle about this. I promise. Well, Marigold felt her face flaming once more. It's all about your uncle. What has Uncle Frank done? He hasn't done anything, but it's complicated. Kate gave Marigold a thoughtful look. Then nodded. You don't have to say anything more, Marie. The heart wants what the heart wants. But I can't afford to fall in love with a man like Frank. Why? Do you feel that he's too old for you? Caleb told me that he's only 38 years old and you're 23, so I don't see that it's such a great age difference. 15 years is really not that big of a deal. Marigold shook her head. It's not about our age difference. Then what is it? He's a sheriff? A law enforcement officer? That's just his job. It's because of his job that I can't afford to be in love with him, Kate. Things can never work between us. What does Uncle Frank's job have to do with your feelings for him? Marigold took a deep breath, then decided to come clean. She owed Kate the truth. I met my late husband, Jim, when I was in 8th grade. Since I was a late bloomer and somewhat not that interested in school, I was a slow student, so I was 17 at the time, and my family lived in New York. After a while, we fell in love, and I thought he was my dream come true. Jim was so sweet and kind and worshipped the ground I walked on. Against my parents' advice, we eloped and moved to Bravia, New Jersey. Life was wonderful. She twisted her lips. Jim didn't seem to have a job, but we lived very well. Things were so good that I began to get suspicious, especially when Colby was born. So I asked him where all the money was coming from, and he told me that his rich aunt had died and left him quite a bit of money which he'd invested, and we were just enjoying the dividends. That happens. But that wasn't how it was in Jim's case. I tried to believe him, but something within me wouldn't let go. I tried to write to my parents, but they sent me a letter saying they had washed their hands of me and I was on my own. Kate made a sound of distress but didn't say anything. Well, because of my suspicions, things became strained between us. Jim started coming home very late and leaving very early. He refused to speak to me, and I noticed that he had started drinking. One day, he got very drunk, and when he came home, passed out on the bed. I went through his pockets, and that's when I found out where he was getting all that money from. Where? I can't really tell where the first money came from, but he invested in a brothel, going into partnership with its middle-aged owner. Her name was Veronica Brinks. I can't begin to imagine what you must have felt. I prayed for the ground to open up and swallow me. Marigold had a faraway look in her eyes. For nearly 2 years, I had lived on the pain of numerous women, and it broke my heart. There and then, I moved out of the house, taking my son Colby with me. I didn't realize that I was pregnant with Micah. Where did you go? I had no money, so I went to a women's shelter. A few days later, I read in the newspaper that Veronica had fallen down the stairs in her house and broken her neck. Well, the coroner ruled that she was pushed to her death, and 2 prostitutes came forward to say that Jim had done it. As part owner of the brothel, it looked like he wanted to own the whole thing. He tried to flee, but Veronica's son shot him. Marigold turned a desperate look to Kate. My husband was wicked. How do I fall in love with a good man like Frank? Chapter 20. Free at Last. Willie Fox, David Wagner, and Alan Brown. You've all been found guilty of committing arson and the willful destruction of property, as well as 6 attempts of murder. Circuit Judge Fraser Alton's voice boomed over the silent court. His glasses were perched at the end of his nose, and he looked down at the 3 criminals. I hereby sentence you to 60 years in prison each. You shall live your days out behind bars that will deter you from committing any more crimes, and so the public will be kept safe from you. May God have mercy on your souls. And he brought down his gavel to signify that the case was over. A loud cheer broke out in the courtroom, but Frank didn't pay attention to the public. His eyes were on the 3 men in the dock, and their stunned looks brought some satisfaction to him. They had received the justice due to them. "You promised this wouldn't happen," Willie Fox yelled as the U.S. Marshals were leading him and his friends out of the courtroom. "I'll get you for this," he continued yelling, but was taken out of court before Frank could see who he was talking to. There were so many people milling outside of the courtroom. It was as though the whole of Purity had turned out for the hearing and sentencing. It had been a straightforward case, and Frank smiled at the prosecutor who had come in from Boise. At his request, the usual prosecutor, another of Swindle's cronies, had found himself off the case due to a technicality. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, sending people running back into the courtroom. Frank pushed his way out and found the 3 criminals pinned to the ground by his 2 deputies and the U.S. Marshals. A few feet away, a man lay on the ground bleeding from a wound in his chest. It was Oscar, and before Frank could take a step in his direction, Dr. Whiteman was there and pronounced the man dead. What happened? Frank walked to one of the marshals. This one, the marshal kicked Willie on the side. He grabbed my gun and shot that fellow. The case was over. The criminals were on their way to Boise to begin their prison term. Willie would also be charged for the murder of Oscar, who Frank now knew was the one who sent them. The bandit's body was lying in the morgue amidst heavy security because the U.S. Marshals and some bounty hunters hoped that Lawson would show up to claim it, giving them the opportunity to apprehend him. Somehow, Frank knew that the man wouldn't show up, and the county would end up burying his brother, but that didn't bother him. Oscar was dead, and that meant one less vicious criminal. His new life was about to begin, and he walked into the house, whistling tunelessly. How did it go? Kate was immediately on her feet when he came in. "Oh, yes," he said, sweeping Marigold off her feet, even as she giggled and tried to protest at the same time. "Those criminals are on their way to Boise, and they were each sentenced to 60 years in the can." But that's not all the good news. However, he put Marigold back on her feet, but took her hand and held it. "Oscar, the man who shot me weeks ago, was killed just outside the courthouse." "What?" Both women were horrified. "Yes. One of the prisoners grabbed a marshal's gun and shot him. I think Oscar was to have arranged for their case to favor them, and when it didn't, the man shot him." "But that's not my headache anymore," Frank said. "Willie will be tried in Boise at my request. Purity has had enough excitement to last us for a while. And then again, we don't want Lawson planning something horrible when the new case is going on. So for safety's sake and to protect this town, the case will be tried in Boise." "I'm just glad that it's over," Marigold said. Frank knew that they were still a long way from attaining total peace and security in the town, but he would take his nephew's advice. Seize the day and leave the rest to God. "Kate, do you mind watching the boys for a little bit?" "No, Uncle Frank." She was beaming as she waved them away, and Frank took Marigold's hand again and led her out of the house. "Marigold, I'm not a young man, and so I won't waste time beating about the bush. I love you and want you to be my wife so we can be a family." "What?" Marigold looked at him in astonishment. "You love me?" "Yes, for a while now, and I know you have feelings for me. Kate told me that you wanted to leave because of that." "The traitor," she said good-naturedly, her heart beating rapidly. "Well?" "You want me and my boys." Marigold's voice trailed away. "Why?" "Yes, I want you and the boys forever." Frank raised her right hand to his lips and gently kissed the back of it. "The three of you and me will make one big happy family because I love you all so much." "With my baggage and all?" Marigold couldn't believe that she was free at last. "We all have baggage, but we need to choose to look past all that and find happiness." Marigold nodded and then decided to tell Frank the truth about her late husband. "That's what happened to my husband. Marigold, I wish I could take away that pain and your past, but I can't. All we can hope to do is make a better future for ourselves and our boys." "Do you really mean that?" She had told Frank all about Jim, but he didn't seem to care. "You were young and impressionable, and someone took advantage of you. You loved him and couldn't have known that Jim was the kind of person he turned out to be. Forgive yourself and then forgive your husband and let it go," he smiled. "Besides, I happen to need a good housekeeper and cook, one who will be with me on a long-term basis." "What a coincidence." Marigold summoned a big smile. "I happen to know a housekeeper who is available for as long as you will need her." Laughter sparkled in Frank's eyes as he closed the distance between them, pulling her into his arms. This sheriff wants a forever housekeeper, and he won't accept anything less than that. "Marigold, I never thought I would ever fall in love again, but I was wrong." He kissed her on the forehead. "The three of you broke down the walls around my heart and have now taken residence in it, and I find that I like the feeling. Thank you for making room for us in your heart, Frank, and thank you for loving me as much as I love you. Marigold Pritt, I'd be honored if you would do me the honor of becoming my wife." "Yes," she whispered, laying her head on his chest. The two boys rushed from the house, Colby holding his small brother's hand. Marigold picked up Micah while Frank picked Colby, and they made a small, tight circle. Frank's arms were large enough to hold the three of them close to his heart, and she laid her head on his chest like her sons were doing. "Mama, why are you crying?" Colby asked. "Because I'm so happy, Colby. Mr. Frank is going to be my new husband and your new father." "Can we call him Papa?" "Yes," Frank answered hoarsely, feeling something hold his throat, and he swallowed hard. "Colby, it is a great honor to be your papa. I love you and Micah so much and promise to be a good father to you forever." Moisture glistened in his eyes and he blinked rapidly. Marigold was wiping tears from her own eyes when Frank gently planted a kiss on her upturned lips. This was where she had found happiness and forever, in the arms of her gruff and large county sheriff. Kate was joined by her husband on the porch as they stood watching the small, happy family. "It's about time too, Uncle Frank," Caleb murmured, and his wife concurred. The end. Thank you for listening. Here at Pure Read, we aim to serve you, our dear readers and listeners, with good, clean Christian stories. You can be assured that any Pure Read book you pick up will not only be hugely enjoyable, but free of any objectionable content. We are deeply thankful to you for choosing our books. Your support means that we can continue to provide stories like the one you have just listened to. To browse our range of clean and wholesome titles, go to pureread.com. Please like and subscribe to our channel. That way you'll be the first to hear when new stories arrive here for your enjoyment. God bless you, and thank you again for listening.